Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the Embase webinar today. My name is Xiongyan Xu. I'm the Solution Marketing Manager for Embase. Today in this session, we will introduce the Embase French Local Literature module, also called as French Colloquial Collection. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things. We will recommend you to use the full screen to watch the webinar. The presentation slides and the recording will be made available after the broadcast, and you can access it by using the same link. If you want to know more about Embase French Local Literature module or wish to request a full demo about this module, please use the Contact Us form. An Elsevier consultant will get in touch with you. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please send it to us at the question box, and then we will address some of them in the Q&A session at the end. Okay, for today's Embase webinar, we are delighted to have Embase Product Manager, Dr. Iveta Petrova. Iveta Petrova holds a PhD from Leiden University for research done on Wnt signaling in the nervous system. She joined Embase team at Elsevier as part of the Content Quality Department. For 2 years, she was responsible for writing and updating the indexing guidelines, as well as monitoring the quality of indexing. 1 year ago, she joined the product management team of Embase. Currently, her tasks include continuous engagement with customers and market research to further improve and develop tools to support them in their daily responsibilities, especially the enhancement of evidence-based medicine, pharmacovigilance, and medical device clinical evaluation and safety. So, Iveta, can you tell us more about Embase French Local Collection?
Thank you for the very nice introduction, Xuan. So today, a few points. I will start with the basics of who we are as Embase, what is really the basis of our content and the goal that we strive to cover in terms of biomedical literature. Then I will switch to our latest local collection, the French local collection, what that really means, what type of content we selected for it, how. And then I will switch to specific workflows that this collection aims to support. So, for example, how to support pharmacovigilance practices for the local markets in France, how to support the updates of clinical guidelines or systematic reviews with additional evidence-based information, as well as additional information when you're building your clinical evaluation report for medical devices or medical device post-market surveillance. So to start with who we are as Embase, our aim is to be as comprehensive as possible, and we're continuously working on that by adding additional journals, but adding also journals that are important to the use cases of our users. Which means that it's all centered around biomedical literature, peer-reviewed literature, as well as conference abstracts. At the moment, meaning in the beginning of 2019, we're covering above 8,000 journals, and the records at the moment, as of January 2019, are above 36 million. A big focus for us is the conference coverage. The conference abstracts in 2019 are already above 3 million. This is mostly to increase the currency of the content available to everyone. We, as a part of Elsevier, we know the laborious process of publishing in peer-reviewed journals, the timelines that the researchers are facing, the timelines between your research that is presented at the conference until it's finally published, even as an article in press. So to help further with that, we aim to increase that coverage as we go. And then another goal in terms of not just coverage as much as possible, but actually to address local bias, for example, coming from just one geographical location. We strive to have as broad coverage as possible in terms of international coverage. So not only English-based literature, but literature coming from Europe, from APAC, from EMLA, this is really to support additional evidence on different use cases. So our content always is aimed not only at US-based journals, but also outside of Europe, and this is as of last year, even before launching the new collection. And going beyond that, a few examples of the specific coverage for non-English content. So for example, considering that today we're talking about French content, we're looking at more than 900,000 records as of 2019 on Embase.com that is coming from French literature. And in 2018, the number of records that we added to Embase.com was above 17,000. So as a global Embase coverage, we already cover as much as possible coming from international literature. And going beyond the biomedical literature, specifically into clinical studies or the ones that are very important for systematic reviews or for clinical trials, the randomized control clinical trials, we specifically aimed that the literature that we're adding is valuable, so that it's bringing additional information for either patient safety or research purposes. To take it a step further, we started looking at adding additional literature beyond what we already cover as local journals. And the first one that we looked at was French literature and the French sources. So this was a huge project on our end because it was the first time that we were looking at adding a new collection that is coming from a local language and different types of publications. So the first step of this was actually aimed at the source selection. So we actually worked with local authorities, with our customers, as well as experts in the field, to actually build this initial list of suggested titles. The suggested titles were then passed to our content experts, so all of the reviews and all of the suggested titles are following the same procedure as all of the other journals that are covered by Embase. So it's doing the same best practices, it's following the quality regulations to be indexed on Embase.com. Then we had to address the source acquisition. This is mostly because Embase doesn't cover only Elsevier content. Embase covers beyond Elsevier, so that means third-party publishers from big to small publishers. And to address every single publisher, it was a very, again, laborious part on our end. It's something that we're still working on because we want to continue to expand the collection in order to bring the most value to everyone who is using it. And then we started looking beyond the collection. We started looking really at how to use the content that we're receiving. And the content we receive mostly is completely in French, or a very small part will be in English, like the title, or sometimes title and abstract, but most of the time it will be completely in French, which means that for the current users of Embase, you will not be able to apply the best practices of using the taxonomy search with M3, or you cannot run your searches simultaneously with your current searches. So to standardize this, we had to come up with a standard process, which was to translate the content that is coming from the French local collection, and then follow the standard procedures and processes that we already have in place. Once this was finalized, the collection was live in production, which leads eventually to additional biomedical content that is available as an additional collection to our users. So some of the questions and more on the content side. As of February 2019, the collection consists of 94 journal titles. Here are just a few on the slide. You can contact us if you would like to have more information. As I mentioned earlier, we're open to additional suggestions as we would like to bring as much evidence and information to our users as possible. The journals that were added are on top of the existing French journals in Embase, and the records come to us on a regular basis, but the regular basis can vary according to the type of journal. So we're actually receiving electronic journals, but at the same time also printed journals. The printed ones will have a delay for the reasons of delivery, but then we have to also digitalize the content, and only then it can follow the rest of the procedure of translated and content extraction. The printed ones will not have a specific link to the full text, again for the reason that they are not digitally available to us. Once the content is available to us, it actually undergoes a translation. So this is once we receive the journal issue at Elsevier, it will either undergo translation directly, or it will be digitalized from the printed journals, and it will go to a translation step. The translation step is also separated. One step is translating the title and abstract and keywords, which will be visible on embase.com and can be used for free text search and retrieval at any point. Another part is the full text translation that is used for indexing purposes. And the full text translation is not available to our users. It's a similar point as what we have with all the other journals, so it's only on subscription based to the journal itself. So on embase.com you will see actually a translated version of the title and abstract and keywords, as well as the original one in French. If there is no abstract available, so for example if it's a case report in the form of a letter, Embase actually creates an abstract in English, and then only the title will be available in French, and then title and abstract will be available in English for search. Then the indexing procedure follows the standard rules of Embase indexing for the global collection, which means that all the relevant information for drug, devices, diseases, and medical concepts will be extracted together with all of the linked information between them. So if there is a drug-drug interaction, that information, if it's coming from the full text from a table or result section, will be reflected in the indexing, as well as any relevant trade names or manufacturer names for drugs or devices. So here is actually just a quick overview of the indexing process. This is the standard process that is undergoing every record that goes through manual curation. The full text is made available to the indexers after being translated. Then they're identifying only the relevant concepts from the full text. Those concepts are translated to the preferred terms of our taxonomy entry, keeping in that way the search and retrieval standard. And eventually all of these index terms are available on the record details page together with the translated title and abstract and the original French title and abstract. Another step that we additionally had to introduce, apart from translation, is actually keeping the translation quality at the standards that we would like to have. So to bring actually value to everyone using the content has to be at high quality in terms of selecting the journals, but also the information that is extracted from it should also be at the same high quality. So for that, we had to introduce additional monthly checks on the translation quality, and these are based on the accuracy, relevance, consistency, completeness, clarity, and the style of language. And the current benchmark that we have based on these criteria is 98%. The latest report was above 98%. It was 98.6 in December. Considering that we are running those translation quality checks after the month is finished, we're always lagging, let's say, a month after the last check. So the latest one that we have at the moment is from December, and it's above our benchmark. So the translation quality is performing as expected. Apart from this, we're also monitoring the indexing quality, again, in order to comply with what is expected considering the Embase quality as general. And the indexing quality is also checked on monthly basis. This is based on the recall and precision, which means that the recall is how many concepts are important from that specific record, and considering how many of them are important, how many of them were identified. The precision, on the other hand, is how many of the important ones were correctly identified. So are there any concepts that were incorrectly identified, like, for example, maybe a background information point or something? So the indexing quality is measured at the same time as for the global collection, and it's held to the same quality standards as for the global collection. In other words, we want that all of the users have a seamless experience regardless whether they're using the Embase global collection or the French local collection or a combination of the two. And how the quality check takes place. In order to avoid bias, there is a random sample, as you can imagine, and you can run those searches also on embase.com. On daily basis, there are thousands of records added, so not each of them is checked, but a random sample is taken every month, and it's checked by two separate QA experts to make sure that the alignment between addressing the indexing rules as well as using the taxonomy is in line, as well as suggesting new concepts for improving the taxonomy in the future. So having additional content as a researcher, I think, is always great. You're up to date with what's best practices in the field. It's giving also an overview from a different perspective, but there are also a few specific points where this content can be applied in a very practical way. One of them is specifically for drug safety. So drug safety is centered around patient safety. The whole point of monitoring drug safety on a regular basis, which is at least once a week, is to make sure that everything that the patient is getting as treatment is aimed at treatment and will have as few adverse events as possible. At the same time, for ensuring that all of the reports are going in the proper way, you have to monitor different sources for potential signals. And some of these sources would be even social media at the moment. I know that even Cochrane at the moment is looking at specifically adverse events that are coming from Twitter. It's very challenging, but also very interesting because it's also in real time. Additional ones will be spontaneous reports by patients or physicians, following specific routes set up by the manufacturing companies where you can submit those signals. But quite a number of reports is coming from literature. And again, the latest information that we have from the EMA is their report from March 2018, which is based on information from 2017, the reports that were submitted to them and they monitor. And potential signals from literature in 2017, according to their pharmacovigilance report, was above 16%. So still quite a substantial amount of potential drug safety reports that need to be reviewed and assessed. Considering that Embase is the most comprehensive biomedical database and that 16% of these reports are coming from literature, it's also very logical that Embase is recommended by a number of regulatory authorities, including the EMA and the Chinese FDA, as well as additional experts in the field of evidence-based medicine like Cochrane. To live up to these recommendations, we strive to add additional content that will help to improve the patient safety and the reports for drug safety, which means that the content that we're adding, we're also thinking about whether it's clinically relevant, whether it's relevant for research, and that's why a lot of the additional reports that are being monitored are actually coming from Embase at the moment. A further note from the regulations of the EMA on drug safety is that apart from monitoring literature as a whole, there is a specific one on local literature. So medical publications in local journals in the country where the medicinal products are marketed. In other words, if a marketing authorization holder is marketing a specific medicinal product in a local market, they also have to look for signals coming specifically from that market. At the moment, or actually it's not really at the moment, but a year ago, the way we were supporting this was, as I mentioned earlier, with the additional local literature that we're always adding to Embase. So it would be, for example, if you would like to run a search specifically for a local affiliate of the company, that you can limit your search to French language, so that will give you the journals that are actually written in French or partially in French. Then you could also use filters like the country of the author, which is one option. It's maybe not the best option because the author can be collaborating and maybe the report is coming from another country, and country of the journal. So these are just a few of the limits that we have on Embase.com if the report is aimed at specifically local literature. And all of these limits and additional cases can be applied on the quick search. They can be applied by either using syntax or by applying the filter options or the limit options in the ribbon on Embase.com. And here are a few suggestions. So indeed you could run them one by one and combine them, or you can type it in as a whole. And a similar situation for preview wizard. So when we're adding additional content, of course the content will be available through all of the search forms at the same time, and it can be applied in the easiest way possible. So the easiest way being the one that is preferred by you. So at that point of time, so in 2018, we were supporting the local pharmacovigilance practices with the latest conference proceedings, a lot of local journals, in press publications, articles in press, at the same time the in-depth indexing of adverse drug reactions, specifically trade names and manufacturer names. And of course, all of this can be automated, but there were still further challenges in the local literature monitoring. And here just a few of them, like how do you align the processes at the local level with the global level? How do you implement these best practices on the two different locations and then merge the reports? How do you make sure that your search strategies, considering that they are different, will be auditable and that they're easily reproducible or trackable, especially as I mentioned that a lot of information is still in print. Then it's very nice that the EMA is thinking about the local markets, but at the same time there are no detailed guidelines what is actually regarded as the important sources or criteria on how to identify the relevant sources. And then, of course, there is just the pure process part, so the time that it goes into identifying all of these, updating them. As you know, a lot of journals sometimes cease to exist even without a notice. Others are bought by another publisher and change the name. So there is a lot of variations going there that need to be monitored on a regular basis. And at the same time, you want to make sure that the whole process is compliant also with the global processes. So our approach to this was that if you're already running your pharmacovigilance searches on Embase, you can just expand it to another collection. So just the way we have right now Medline collection and Embase collection, it's just like plugging in an additional collection to it. If you want to identify specifically which parts of the report came from the local collection, you can view this by selecting and limiting to that collection only, but at the same time you can run your report on all three at the same time without thinking it's originating from a French journal that used to be in the global collection of Embase, or it originated from a French journal from the new French local collection. If you are to visualize and you want to see where it's coming from, on the results page, the French local collection is visualized again in the same way as we visualize if it originates from Embase or from Medline, or the overlap Embase Medline. It's exactly at the same place. So we're trying to keep again everything as standard as possible so that you don't have to train in a new way. And then what is visible on the record details page, as mentioned earlier, is that you have the translated title, abstract, and keywords if available, the original title and abstract, as well as the in-depth Embase indexing coming from the translated full text. So all of these will be available for each record as long as there are the relevant links or trade names coming from the full text. So one way of compiling specifically French literature reports, so very focused on French literature, will be that you can combine the different limits that we have at the moment. So you can combine the French local collection together with the country of the journal that it's published in, the language of the journal or the articles, and make that combination only for a focused French literature report. If you're happy with the report, and this is the one that you want to update on a regular basis and monitor specifically French literature, you can set up an alert. And from then on, for example, on weekly frequency, you will receive an update if there is a new content available, regardless from which collection. It's worth noting here that once you set it up, you are not receiving the first alert until the first Monday, and from then on it's coming, let's say, every week, if you choose to be on a weekly basis. In other words, what we offer with the additional French collection is that you could run your specific French literature reports, but you can also run a combined report with the current capabilities on the English literature as well as the rest of the international coverage, and the French local collection that is translating the full text. And here is a small example of our suggested workflow. So instead of having multiple steps that are taking place at the global level of coming up with a query, validating it, making it compliant for the literature coverage, then automating the process, and then doing the same one for the French affiliate, you could just do this in 2 steps. So you could set up a literature report together with the French collection in one go. So actually you're setting up your search strategy as one, and you just include the French collection without specifically adding any additional or different search strategies for it. And once you validate that, let's say, global plus French reporting line, you can set up an alert in the very same way, and then regardless from where the new content will come, you will be alerted on a regular basis, and you can continue with your reporting workflow. Some of the additional values that the local collection is bringing, a big point is the reliability, because it's additional information on drugs, medical terms and devices. It's at the moment it's at 94 journals, but those are completely covered in terms that we're regularly receiving content from them, and they are covered in the same way as other journals, so cover to cover, all of the information coming from them. And because it's all in the same place and you have tracking history, all of these can be audited. It's also saving a lot of time because you don't have to get subscriptions for every printed journal. You don't have to go through the printed journals, which would take more time, and then digitalize everything into a report. Everything can be aligned in the same way and at the same time. And it's here we put integrability, but it's actually just kind of as part of Embase. So if you have it switched on, you don't have to think about it from then on, just like you don't have to think about whether content is originally coming from Medline or from Embase unique journals. And just a few feedback points that we received during the beta testing, and it was really well received on the 3 points that we just mentioned, that it's time and cost saving, and it's optimizing their processes, and at the same time it's easy in case they would get an audit from the regulatory authorities. As I mentioned at the beginning, additional content is great for multiple workflows and projects, and apart from drug safety, additional clinical information and biomedical information is always a good start if you are to update clinical guidelines, if you're working on a new research topic, or if you're updating a systematic review. So if we go back to the experts in the field on systematic reviews, part of their guidelines at number 2 is actually searching for studies. So searching for studies, trying to avoid bias also, so trying to get a more balanced view that is, again, not only coming from English literature, but also from other languages. And if you take an example of one systematic review, for example, for innovations in the treatment of breast cancer, and you look for additional information that is coming from the French local collection, we find additional new information that was not known to us until now, and maybe based on that, it will be worth considering updating the systematic review or changing the best practice guidelines, for example. And thinking about compiling literature as a systematic review and in a very precise way. Another use case that the French collection can be applied to is to support the clinical evaluation reports and post-market surveillance for medical devices. Again, based on the fact that there is additional information, and at the same time, if the market authorization holders are marketing their devices in these countries. So the best practices for searching for literature are also talking about where they're recommending Embase. They're talking about the adequate coverage of devices and therapies used in Europe specifically. So France is not the whole of Europe, but at the same time it's giving an additional view and additional information on the use of the medical devices there. And if we just take again one example of aortic stenosis, for example, then there is additional information coming about aortic prosthesis and additional artificial valves that can be applied. So this could be a good starting point for updating a clinical evaluation report and looking at how they're used for the therapeutical uses. So what we have covered is the basics of Embase content as the most comprehensive biomedical database, the basics for the French local collection, which is an additional collection to the global Embase collection. It's 94 journals at the moment, and please contact us for additional suggestions. So they will undergo the content review. At the moment, the journals are being translated in full text, and the full text is used for extracting index terms in the same way as English literature. And the French collection is supporting specifically drug safety. It can be used for updating systematic reviews or clinical guidelines, as well as to monitor post-market surveillance of medical devices or updating the clinical evaluation reports. And with that, I would like to thank you for the time today. You can use the link to contact us for additional information.
Thank you, Iveta, and thank you for this very interesting talk. And I think a lot of people are interested in this non-English literature module. So I have a few questions that are addressed by the audience already. So I will start with it. First, people ask, can you tell a bit more about the content coverage? So that means from when is those journal covered by the Embase literature module?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. We started looking at the coverage, of course, earlier, so from 2017 onwards. We have content from 2018 forward, and at the moment we're covering, I mentioned a few times, the 94 journals, but it's always, number of journals. It's not the same as how much information. So at the moment, it's more than 7,000 records. To give you an idea, also at the same time in the global collection, we have another 180 French journals that last year resulted in more than 17,000 records. So it's really, we expect that there will be some variations because the type of journals that are now in the local collection are a little bit different. But the content coverage started from 2018.
Okay, I hope that is very clear for the question that we have asked. So the next question is it possible to see the full text of the journal or of the article?
The full text is never available on Embase in general, regardless the French local collection or the global collection. With the French local collection, it will depend on the type of journal. So the journals that are actually electronically available will have the link to the full text, just the way that we have it now. And if every user has also access to the journal, they will be able to see the full text. If it's a printed journal, then there will be no link to it, unfortunately, so it will be a little bit more challenging to get the full text further. So it will be more about contacting the publisher and getting the full text from there.
Okay, thanks. You want to add something?
No, I think, yeah, if there are further questions about the availability of the full text, we can also be contacted after the webinar. I mean, it's something that is also part of the license agreements with third-party publishers that it cannot be made available on Embase, but the most important information from the full text will be extracted in the index. So the drug devices, disease concepts, and the links between them will be already visible on the record details page.
Exactly, and those has been manually indexed by our indexer, correct?
Precisely. So they're manually indexed, as well as the extraction of manufacturer names and trade names. These are visible at the bottom of the record details page in the additional fields that we have. So after the translation step, all of the French local collection goes through manual curation.
Okay, thank you. You want to add more, Iveta? No? Okay. Next question, Iveta. Why is the translated abstract sometimes different from the original or the current French titles?
Right, yeah, so there are a few things that might cause some confusion between the French local collection and the current French journals. So the French journals that we have on embase.com that are not part of the collection, some of them already have a title and abstract in French and in English available to us, and they will be displayed the way that they're displayed also on the journal website, for example, or the full text availability. And those are not always one-to-one translation, but they are made available to everyone in the same way as they will be made available by the publisher. In the case of the French collection, we actually translate the title and abstract, and that is why it's actually really a translated one. It's not an English and a French version, but it's more like an original and a translated version. And for the few cases where there is no abstract, then the abstract is summarized by us, and it's only available then in English. So the summary will be only in English.
Okay, thanks. I hope this is clear. Next question, Iveta, because you show the use cases for pharmacovigilance and also for devices. Is it possible for the users to search the trade name and the manufacturer name in the French module?
Yes, they can apply the same field codes for device or drug manufacturers as for the global collection. So all of the search fields, syntax rules, filters, everything can be applied exactly in the same way and at the same time, actually. So just like we are applying the, for example, let's say a manufacturer name for the overlap between Medline and Embase, the same can be just applied to the French local collection.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so actually the French module is just, you can just use it as you usually regularly using the embase.com, applying the search form and the syntax, everything, but just in a different collection or different content we have covered, right?
Exactly, so it doesn't need changes to any of the current processes or already in place standard processes. It's just that the current process will cover beyond what is currently covering.
Right, right, exactly. As you just mentioned, so for some of the global team, maybe they have already developed some search form or search queries. This can be simply applied just for adding this French module and searching in the content. I think
precisely.
that's very,
it's just it's like an activating step, like, you know, add an additional channel of information and run the same search.
Mm-hmm. I hope this is also clear for the audience. And another question, or I think this is going to be our last question for today. Can you tell us when the Embase French module or the French local collection will be available?
All right, yeah, it's already available. So if anyone from the audience would like to have trial access or a demo by the Embase team, they can contact us.
Okay, thank you, Iveta. So thank you everyone for actually joining us today online and also for your interesting questions. I hope you found today's session useful and also the questions, the answers provided by Iveta is useful for you too. The presentation slides and the recording will be made available after this broadcast, and you can access this by using the same link you have. If you want to know more about Embase French module or French local literature module or wish to request a full demo, as Iveta just mentioned about this module, please use the contact us form that is listed in the attachment and the links in this webinar. An Elsevier consultant will get in touch with you directly. With that, I thank you, Iveta, again for such interesting topic and also all the nice answers. And thank you for audience. Again, I'm closing the webinar and we hope to see you next time. Thank you and bye.